Welcome to Alberta Impact, everyone. I'm your host, Bryce Lambert. With population growth on a consistent rise, municipalities are starting to look at more sustainable approaches to future-proof their city's structure and economic growth. What are some of the measures being taken into consideration? What are some of the changes the city has to adapt to? These are just a couple of the many questions we all have in mind. So joining me tonight to talk more on this is the Director of Planning for the City of Edmonton, Kalen Anderson. Kalen, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your position and kind of how you see things going with the city on a growth perspective.
Sure. So I'm currently the Director of the City Plan, which is Edmonton's brand new long-range plan to double our population over the next 40 to 45 years. So we have to think about how we're going to not only accommodate another million people, but actively attract them into the city so that people are able to build the kinds of lives that they're seeking, whether it's through their economic prosperity, access to education, great places to raise families, and so forth.
Gotcha. So how do you guys come up with that number? So you said about 1 million in the next 40 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you guys kind of come up with that number? What's the research that's done?
Well, it's a doubling of where we're at now, essentially. Okay. So we just did the census, and we came in, the municipal census for Edmonton, and we came in just shy of 1 million people, which means that, according to our chief economist at the city, we'll very, very likely be hitting 1 million people in 2020.
Yeah.
And it's not unreasonable at all to imagine doubling a population every about 40 years or so. And in fact, we have done so in the past 40 in Edmonton. And it's just a good time horizon to imagine, or sorry, not a time horizon, but a population horizon to plan for instead of planning for a time horizon. Gotcha. And the reason for that is that things are complicated in the world. Mm-hmm. And you can't know that something will happen in 2036 or 2042, but you can know that certain numbers of people will need certain services and amenities over time. So whether that happens really quickly or really slowly, the point is planning for that growth proactively will set us on the right course.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, a recent explanation would be like just with the Syrian refugees coming in, us bringing in, some more people across the country as be it, but some of those came into Edmonton. So that's, I can see how I can understand how that could be unpredictable from time to time. So for sure. So now as the city plan, what does that all entail? Like what are kind of the things that fall under your umbrella that you look at?
Mm-hmm. So ultimately the city plan will be a bylaw that's passed by our city council. Mm-hmm. So it'll be our kind of guiding document for how we start to deploy our strategies as a city. So the City of Edmonton, based on council's approval, already has a vision, and that was just approved in April, and it's called Connect Edmonton, and that sets out the broadest level kind of goals and the aspirations for what Edmonton will become. And then the city plan will describe the kind of key choices that we need to make to become more urban, healthier, more climate resilient, and regionally prosperous. So that's really what we're focusing on. So the kind of the sorts of things that would be in the city plan would be specific strategies for how and where we grow. So it would address things like new growth areas in the suburbs, more intense potentially redevelopment in the inner city. It would also address transportation patterns, whether that's for trucks, for private automobile, for mass transit, cycling. It would address our environmental concerns, so thinking about how we can be more efficient and respond to things like the climate emergency that's just been declared by our council and many different communities across the world, and how we can think about our economic prosperity, where we are today and where we'll be later. And the most important part, and I left the best for last, is that this has to be a plan for people. So at the end of the day, we don't make plans for cars and trains and trees. We build places for people, and so that's really what has to be at the root of all of this. Gotcha.
So with some of like the, and it's funny, I was just talking with a friend of ours the other day, they just moved into a high-rise downtown, like how green the city is, like just like the parks, the trees and things like that. Does the planning that you implement or that you research and kind of put towards moving it forward, is it kind of fall into those things as well, like parks and things like that?
Yeah, it absolutely will. So we do need to consider how we will not only steward what we've inherited from previous generations, like our beautiful river valley and our ravines, but how we will work to expand them and to make them more inclusive and more inviting and to be the best stewards that we can in the future. So we will be looking to expand our park systems, even do like some more urban style, probably some tree planting to be able to continuously increase that tree canopy, because we know that it's not only great for the environment, but it makes people feel more calm and good to be in environments with lots of nature.
Yeah, hands down.
And when we were as part of this, doing a city plan, it's basically a giant public conversation. So we've been doing nothing but public engagement for about 18 months, and it's been awesome. And while there's tons of opinions about what people care about, like hands down, our park system, our trees, our river valley, access to our natural amenities comes out top of the list all the time. So,
well, I don't think you can deny that we're like pretty far ahead on that end of things. Like I said, like our river valley is phenomenal. You said it yourself, and the access to it, and the trails, and the biking paths and whatnot. Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable right now. Just being downtown the Glenora area there, I couldn't believe how green it was and how beautiful it was. And so I think as a city, you're doing a bang up job on keeping that, out there. What are some of the other, what are some of the initiatives? You said there's lots of conversation going on. Are these like town halls that you're typically having? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of different ways of doing this. So we have done some traditional town hall types of things, but also we have to be a bit more creative and try to find ways to connect with people in environments where they are already communicating and interacting. So I think our team behind the scenes has done a really good job with trying to use social media to be able to create those conversations and cultivate them. We've also done a lot of sort of just pop by, drop in sorts of things at shopping malls where if you don't want to commit to the conversation, but you want to give your 2 cents, literally, we're there for you.
Gotcha.
And then also we have much more kind of in-depth multi-hour workshops where people can really roll up their sleeves and contribute. So we've tried to establish a number of different kind of opportunities for people, and we've been really trying hard to get a diversity of people in terms of backgrounds, geographies, and age. So,
right.
Making great efforts to connect with kids of all ages, with elementary right up to kind of university, has been a priority.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And now environmental, it's been a hot topic. So what are some of the initiatives that you take forward, or how do you look at the environmental scale of things on the growth of a city? How do you do that kind of research and stuff?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have done, which is pretty innovative, and certainly new for us within the City of Edmonton, is we've done very specific GHG modeling on different growth patterns. So if you grow a certain way or another way, what differences might you observe in terms of the impacts that you'll have on greenhouse gas emissions? So we do know that there's you can make a major difference through your transportation patterns and how you move, and through your land use patterns, which is how we actually develop the spaces and places that we occupy. So I guess at its basic, the more that you can minimize the length and duration of distances traveled, the better you can impact that greenhouse gas emission number. So there's a few different ways to think about how people can move around the city. One is to provide tons of mass transit options for people to get around everywhere more easily, and that's worthy, and we're encouraging that. But the other way, and it's, I think, even more clever, is to reduce the need for people to travel at all, because you simply have what you need where you live.
Right.
So creating this community of communities and allowing people to experience a bit of a small city life within an increasingly bigger and bigger city.
Right. Okay. And I know like the city's really been pushing towards the development of downtown now more, and making it more accessible for a larger, source of amenities. Even with the arena going in, and shopping and groceries and things like that. That's pretty cool. So again, that's what you're kind of talking about in reducing people having to go outside and kind of revitalize some of those areas to be more friendly to inhabitants.
One of the words we use is kind of complete communities. So you can have not every single thing that you'll ever need.
Right.
Right? Because that's,
pretty tough.
Sometimes I need a beach, and we don't have, unless it's accidental, occasionally in Edmonton.
The whole summer we needed a beach.
We have to leave. But no, so you're absolutely right. So growing the downtown, expanding it, diversifying it, exactly. Like that's an example in that location of creating a more complete community for people who live there. And also our downtown in Edmonton is regionally significant. So people from all over this region use that downtown, whether it's to come to an Oilers game or shopping or just to meet people. But one of the things we're also thinking about through the city plan is that imagine in the fullness of time, as an additional 1 million people live in Edmonton, we can have almost the equivalent of very smaller scale downtown, sort of dispersed throughout Edmonton so that people can kind of connect and get have access to what they need for the week and connect with their friends in many different places, so that you don't have to come downtown. And it's not like we're starting from scratch.
Right.
Like, this already exists in Edmonton, so part of the beauty and the excitement of doing a city plan is none of us have a lock on the city. None of us are designing anything from scratch. We're all part of the moving river of humanity here. So you have to notice, and that's why public engagement is so important. You have to notice what's great about your city, what its assets are. You have to kind of pick away at maybe where it's not working so well, and then you have to work with that instead of trying to change it. So Edmonton's a very, very big city, like quite physically large. And people already have gathering places that they use. And so, hey, why not just continue to make the most of those and coordinate them with excellent transportation? Because you have to be places and you have to be able to get there. So that's kind of hand in glove.
Definitely. And so we were talking off camera earlier just about like sprawl. And I know like that's not kind of the word that that you had mentioned you don't want to use. What's the word that you like to use other than sprawl?
Well, I just think we're developing neighborhoods and communities. And sprawl is not a favored word.
Right.
Not only it comes off sometimes as a bit pejorative or there's a very negative tone about it, but I like to remind myself and everyone that any neighborhood that somebody calls sprawl, it was actually, if that word is being used to describe a brand new neighborhood, like all of our neighborhoods were brand new neighborhoods. So what is it about a neighborhood that was built in 2019 that makes it so much different than one that was built in 1946, for example? Like you could say, I mean, if we want to speak that way, we can say we've sprawled forever and it's all we do. And that's not really a good way of thinking about it. So in fact, we're just building neighborhoods and communities.
Growth.
And it's growth.
Just growth.
It's growth.
Yeah.
And the best thing about the neighborhoods that we build, whether it's today or whether it was 60 years ago, is that they'll keep redeveloping over time. So any neighborhood has the capacity to be great when it's first built, midway through its life cycle, and then getting ready for its redevelopment. And they just constantly change.
Yeah. Well, there's so many cool little communities, like since the Hende's been built and everything going out on the outskirts of that. And they're beautiful communities. And they are extremely reflective of even a downtown Edmonton. Like there's still so much in there, and with like movie theaters popping up and groceries and other businesses. It's super neat to see this, and I think we're going in a really positive direction. And I like, that model of, and me myself, I've never thought about it, but how you're explaining how things to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions is by putting things closer so people don't have to do that travel and whatnot, and making it more accessible. Yeah. So that's really cool. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been super insightful and very awesome. Now, you're obviously taking input from the public and whatnot. Where can people kind of go to find that information out? And we'll add all the links onto this video as well at the end. But where are some of the places that people can go just off the top?
Awesome. Thanks for letting me be able to share that part.
For sure.
The easiest thing to do is to just go to edmonton.ca/the city plan.
Okay.
The city plan. And on there we have all of our information in terms of like what we've done to date. But even more interestingly, I think we have all of our upcoming public engagement.
Awesome.
And so this October we're hosting 5 different sessions in public, like around different parts of the city, and we'll be putting a lot of different material online and looking for more and more feedback and commentary from Edmontonians. So the time is absolutely right.
Perfect.
For people to get involved.
Yeah, you betcha. And we're going through a big push right now too, just on growth. So that's a great time to get involved and have a voice. So super. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been super insightful, and we'd love to hear more about this. And like I said, we'll put all the links on there and spread the message for you.
Thank you.
Good stuff right on.
Okay.